welcome Preston James, the CEO and co-founder of Div Inc. Preston brings with him over 25 years of experience in the technology sector and has founded Div Inc. to inspire, empower, and enable underrepresented founders to build successful high-growth businesses based upon the belief that diversity and inclusion drives innovation. Today, Preston is going to be speaking about generating social and economic equity through entrepreneurship. Welcome, Preston, and thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Super excited to be here this afternoon and ready to go ahead and get started. All right, so again, let's just talk about generating socioeconomic equity through entrepreneurship. So what's going on today? I mean, everybody knows, what we're facing in the US, very polarizing times, very challenging times with COVID and everything else. But I want to quote this statement here from Martin Luther King Jr. from his Why We Can't Wait book. And I think it's still very relevant, as well as many other things that he has shared. But the people of color economic problem was compounded by the emergence and growth of automation. Since discrimination and the lack of education sort of combined people of color to unskilled and semi-skilled labor, people of color remain the first to suffer in these days of great technological development. This was something that was said over almost 50 years ago. That's still very relevant today. So we talk about what's COVID as the pandemic really took a spotlight and really shined it very, very bright on a lot of the social inequities that we've known had been in existence for decades. And those are in health, education, housing and home ownership, business ownership. We saw many people lose their homes. Many people lost their businesses. Folks didn't have access to healthcare. And then also we saw the disparities in the criminal justice systems. So really quick, I want to share this graphic that shows sort of like the trend of the population in the United States. And as you can see, the demographics are going to change pretty significantly over the next 40 years, if you will. I'm just showing this one slide, but today, for example, 62% of the United States population is white, not Hispanic, right? And roughly about 20% are Hispanic, Latino. So in the next 30, 40 years, we're going to see this transition in our population where it will be a minority United States. And I point that out because as the underrepresented communities today being underserved and underinvested and undersupported, this is not something that can continue if we want to remain the great country of the United States as we know it today. So in addition to that, economic disparities are rampant, right? We know income, wealth, asset ownership, and investment. But let me show you some specific details. All right, here is the racial wealth inequality that's in the United States. Right? This is produced by Statista, but also we have a report, I'll show you the link in just a second, that shows this tremendous gap, right? And there was a report that came out recently that said the racial wealth gap is 3x what it was just 10, 15 years ago. So it is actually growing, not decreasing, and that's very problematic for our country. So I'm not going to really go into these, but just going to share very quickly on my screen These are 9 charts that have been produced to show racial inequality or inequality in the United States of America that anyone can actually access. And I will put this link in the chat a little bit later. But there are basically 9 charts that you can see that show the variety of inequality. So here is, in this first chart here is 1963, right? You can see the racial wealth gap was not that significant. And now you look at 2016, the dramatic difference in the racial wealth gap, and that is problematic. And what we know is that the income levels and the wealth associated with people direct impact on the health of individuals. So people who are not considered wealthy or not in the higher income brackets or even the middle average income brackets actually suffer for poorer health, right? And that is statistically proven. And so, and the vast majority, as you can see, is directed towards underrepresented communities that suffer from poorer health as a result of the lack of income and the lack of wealth associated. So taking a look at more, we're talking about income levels, right? And some of you have seen this before, you can see the difference where you have the Black and Latino populations at the bottom of the income levels, the average for all races, and then you see the white and Asian populations as well in terms of the income levels. And I'm just sharing these as maybe some of you are very familiar and some of you may not be, but this is the reality of our situation in our country. And again, we take a look at, and I think this is very important when you talk about education, right? In an earlier slide, I showed where we have disparities, inequities in education being one of those areas. Does it really have impact in many areas? It does. So you can see the average, the median household income based on educational attainment. So if we're denying individuals, people in our country, access to that education, we are also suppressing their opportunity to generate higher levels of income, right? And also pursue other opportunities that may come as a result of that access to education. So let me just skip that. So I'm going to share this information. And this is an example of entrepreneurship in the US. And this is based on data we captured from the Census Bureau. And I'm using these as examples of what we've been able to pull. So 2.6 million African-American owned businesses in the United States, okay? Which represented about a 34% year-over-year growth from 2007 to 2012. And you can see the rest of the 3.3 million Hispanic-owned businesses, they experienced significant growth, Asian-owned as well as non-minority-owned, which is basically white-owned businesses. Now you see in the red, a huge gap. Only 4% of Black-owned businesses are estimated to have employees. So that means 96% of Black-owned businesses and 91% of Hispanic-owned businesses are sole proprietorships. And when you think about that, it's like, okay, maybe that's not such a bad thing. And then also, let's look at how it compares to others. Well, if you look at the Asian and the non-minority, they roughly have 25% of all their total businesses are employer-based. That means they're generating jobs and generating revenue within their businesses. But let's take it a step further. Does it really make a difference? And if you look at the average revenue for these businesses within each of the demographics in general, right? You can see that for sole proprietorship businesses, the average revenue was roughly about $60,000. versus if they were employers, the revenue generated was almost $1 million, right? And you can go and look across, again, all of the different demographics, but suffice it to say, when you're building a business as an employer, the revenue generation amongst demographics sort of like flattens out a little bit. It's not as much of a gap as it is between employer-based and sole proprietorships. So what can you sort of take from that? You can take from that, in essence, that one, you want to create greater parity within all these demographics in terms of employer-based businesses. So we can create more jobs, we can create more revenue, and then also create parity in the revenue generation as well. So a very tremendous opportunity to affect change in entrepreneurship. Now let's talk about women very specifically. This is the growth in businesses overall in the United States during that same period. And the numbers probably will drop a little bit due to COVID. But pre-COVID, there was this trend of women-owned businesses growing at a much faster rate than all businesses in the United States. You can see the breakdown for Black women, for Hispanic women, Asian women, all are experiencing tremendous amount of growth, far exceeding that of male-owned businesses. And that's awesome. But here's the challenge. This, as an example for African-American women in entrepreneurship, and we can break down the same for Hispanic women, Asian women. But if you look at this here, Black women had roughly 1.5 million businesses in the United States during this time period, which also represents more than half of all African-American businesses, right? And they experienced a 67% growth. But here's the other amazing opportunity. It's sad, but at the same time, an amazing opportunity. Only 2.5% of Black women-owned businesses had employees. 2.5% actually had employees, yet they generated more than half of the revenue of all Black women-owned companies. So it's very glaring to say that, yes, Black women are starting, women are starting businesses at a faster rate. And if we can get those women employees to generate jobs and creation in their businesses, the amount of revenue generated, the amount of jobs created can grow tremendously in the United States. So again, an amazing opportunity. Now, the other thing I will share is that there's a lack of investment in underrepresented entrepreneurial businesses. So here are some examples that came out recently. Only 0.42% of venture capital investment went to Black women-led tech startup companies. That's less than 0.5%, right? For Latino-owned businesses, 0.32%. So you combine those two, and that's not even 1% of the investment capital. And we're talking about almost $500 billion of investment capital that went to those demographics. So there's, again, opportunities to actually do better, drive more jobs, drive creation, drive net worth in these underrepresented communities. And again, these are examples of using African-American in the Latino community. Now, is there going to be some upside, right? And there are various reports, and you can look at, many. But here's the deal. Right now, according to the large consulting firms, it's escaping my mind right now. It costs the United States $1.5 trillion, right? Because of the estimated costs associated with the racial wealth disparity in the United States, 1.5 trillion annually. And then again, the opportunity to generate more jobs, more revenue, right, by investing in underrepresented entrepreneurs who provides us with an outstanding opportunity to affect change, not just in their businesses, but in the communities in which they are part of. A tremendous opportunity to contribute to the GDP throughout the United States and the US economy. But so we need to invest in our underrepresented entrepreneurs, invest in our communities to generate more entrepreneurship in the United States. And as most of you should also know, that entrepreneurship it's responsible for the all net new jobs created in the United States, right? So small businesses and entrepreneurship are responsible for generating the net new job creation in the United States. So we need more of our entrepreneurs and innovators here in the United States, and many of them need to come from the underrepresented communities. So what now? As we move forward, the future is right now. We have the opportunity for women leadership in terms of entrepreneurship. But through entrepreneurship, let me share this. And this is why we believe that it's so critical. It's not the only path forward, right? But through entrepreneurship, we can affect the change in terms of not only job creation, but wealth creation and income generation for a broader part of our underrepresented communities and in our communities in general. So why is it so key? Why? Because we talked about the key aspect of building wealth is around asset ownership, right? Asset ownership includes home, business, land, or what have you. So for entrepreneurship, it is about business ownership. And with that business ownership, you own equity. You can own equity in your company depending on how you build your business. And many may say, well, I don't have any equity, I don't know. But that's something that we need to be teaching our communities. We build businesses, and how do we build businesses that can generate equity, not just for the owner, but also for the employees, right? And as we create equity in ownership, it's assets that we're creating, and assets have value that contribute to our net worth. You build a company that has equity, and there's also a valuation associated with that company. Your company has a worth, and that worth is actually contributing to your overall net worth, right? So imagine you build a company and your company is worth, let's just say on the low end, $3 million. Well, that $3 million is part of your net worth, right? And so you can see the net worth of somebody that might have been at $1,000 on that chart is now at 3 million. They're now in that 0.5% because of the valuation they have associated with the company that they have built, right? That company also generates revenue. That revenue feeds into the tax base of their community. A stronger tax base, better schools, better funding for resources needed in the community. Job creation, right, for members of the community. And then, I think just as importantly, is the opportunity to take the experience and knowledge of entrepreneurship, the failures and the successes, and passing that down to the children and your friends and your family to create this generational knowledge of entrepreneurship. Not just basic small business, but also tech startup, and also social entrepreneurship as well. So very critical that entrepreneurship plays a part in helping us create that social and economic equity as we move forward in the future. So this cycle, right, this wealth gap cycle and this inequity and in the racial wealth gaps that we have is really perpetrated because of the lack of intergenerational wealth transfer amongst low-income parents and their children. As a result, as I mentioned, home ownership and other asset building activities are suppressed, right? And we want to be able to break out of that. So how do we break through this, right? We talked about, hey, how do we build entrepreneurship and the business ownership and how critical it is for us to make that a key part of our mindset and make a key part of what we do as a community in general, to become more inclusive in entrepreneurship, be it, again, whether it's small business, whether it's innovative tech entrepreneurs, or it's social entrepreneurship. We need the communities of underrepresented leaders, entrepreneurs to become part of that and be included as part of that. Not just because that's the right thing to do, but also as a country, we benefit as a whole when we have this broader innovation coming from multiple communities, multiple perspectives. It's a tremendous value. So our path forward, a path forward, I should say, is one, let's begin to address root cause issues. And when I say root cause, I'm saying, well, we need to go and understand, right, why entrepreneurship is not an option for many communities, right? And then really find the ways to inject a mindset of growth, a mindset of impact, a mindset of enablement and empowerment to pursue entrepreneurship. Now, I'll be the first to say, I spent 25 years in corporate America, and so I'm relatively new to the entrepreneurship community as I started roughly in about 2014, 2015. So the path does not have to be direct. It can be a path of just innovation. It could be a path of a new idea. But I think what's critical is understanding the mindset to say that I can, right? I may not know how, but I'm going to figure out how to. And then I have a place to go, right, to pursue that idea and make that idea a reality, right? And that's what we want to have happen in terms of innovation. Now, if I were to ask raise their hands, I would bet that 75% of the people attending this webinar right now would say, oh man, I've had an idea before and it was a really good idea, but I didn't go anywhere with it, or I wasn't able to go anywhere. I didn't know how to. And so that idea died. But not only that, 2 years later, 3 years later, somebody else actually came up with the same idea. So how do we take that and capture that innovation, capture that moment, and enable people to pursue the concept of their idea and their innovation? So another path forward is removing the systemic barriers within our ecosystems. And there are barriers. And when I say that, they're not just policies, but there's also culture too, right? To be able to walk in place and feel welcome and not feel like you're less than, right? And to be able to share your idea boldly and proudly and to make it happen. We need to remove those barriers of culture and remove those barriers of policies, remove those barriers of access, if you will. The third thing, if you're looking to make a difference and looking to help us move forward, is to build sustainable and scalable systems and infrastructure to support underrepresented entrepreneurship in the US. Right? What does that mean? That means, building programs, sustainable programs providing access to human and social capital. And we need to do that, not just, when we become grown folks, right? We need to start doing that at the K-12 all the way through corporate, right? Because innovation can come from anywhere. It doesn't matter on the zip code. It doesn't matter whether you were a corporate Joe, whether you have a significant amount of money. Anybody with an innovative idea in the mind should have that opportunity. The other thing, for those that may be on this meeting, is invest in underrepresented entrepreneurship with financial resources, right? Underrepresented entrepreneurs, and as you saw earlier, women entrepreneurs also are very underfunded and under-supported, but yet they're the fastest growing entrepreneurship demographics in the United States. We may be missing, we are missing a very significant opportunity if we do not invest in these underrepresented communities. The other thing I would say, having intentional ecosystem collaboration amongst partners in the community. And the key word here is intentional. People have to come to the table wanting to affect change. Without that, it's just meaningless. It's just data points, check boxes. It has to be intentional ecosystem collaboration to really focus on moving the needle. And then last but not least, for those that are in those positions, to eradicate the laws and policies that enable racism and bias within our government, within our communities in general. We need to remove those laws and policies because historically they've been too oppressive and not providing access to resources and opportunities that we all so deserve. So taking action. Let's go. Let's make those partnerships. Let's invest together. Let's really get involved in making a difference at the systemic level, as I mentioned, K-12 to higher education. Let's invest in our entrepreneurship. Each and every person that's listening to this has the opportunity to make a difference. It's just a matter of deciding how, where, and when. Now, how can you start? And I wish I had taken more time on this particular slide, but I'm going to talk about Div Inc just for a little bit. Div Inc is a tech entrepreneurship ecosystem builder that was founded in 2016, specifically to support underrepresented founders. And I will tell you, my experience was that I recognized the lack of access to really essential resources that entrepreneurs need. And one, there was a lack of access to entrepreneurship education, lack of access to the human and social capital. When I say that, I mean the networks, the mentorship, really getting to understand the community of entrepreneurship, getting access to serial entrepreneurs and the different talent pools that are in that innovation space. And then the third aspect was really the lack of access to financial capital. And so for Div Inc, it was a matter of how do we create something that will help remove those barriers and provide access to those resources and thus provide access to opportunities. And our signature program is what we call a Tech Startup Accelerator program. And some that may not have heard the terminology of the accelerator program, but it is our program, and there are many throughout the United States. Our accelerator program, specifically focused on underrepresented founders, is a 3-month intensive program that takes you through the essential understandings in education, if you will, of how to build a successful, scalable business We provide mentorship, we provide coaching. We work alongside of you as you build your business. So that we do that program, that's 3 months. We take typically about 10 companies in the program. And then we do that program twice a year. So generally speaking, we have about 20 companies that we're helping to launch every year, right? And we've been doing that since 2016. We also have a second component. So when I talk about building programmatic, sustainable programs, what we're doing is we've laid that foundation with the accelerator program. And then on top of that, what we've laid on is what we call our portfolio program, where we continue to work with those participating in the accelerator program, because we know the next 18 to 24 months are really critical to help really build and grow and get those customers you need to generate that revenue. In addition, if you're looking to, fundraise for your business to get additional capital to scale and grow your business, we help you, support you in that aspect as well. The third aspect that we added is we recognized that so many people were coming to Div Inc, but some were a little bit early. They were still at that ideation stage, trying to figure out exactly what their idea was. So they were a little bit too early for us, but we wanted to continue to support them and mentor them. And so we created what we call a validation lab, which is basically an online curriculum that essentially anyone can go to and go through this online curriculum to really help them figure out the early validation of their idea or concept. And so as you look at what we're doing, it's for the really early stage companies, from ideation to about the seed stage, right? We're providing a pathway in that early stage journey. And our goal in life for Div Inc, and as you'll see, we're starting to do that now, is to take our platform and expand that and make it scalable to other cities throughout the United States. And so that's Div Inc's, vision and strategy, and what we execute to really lift up the number of underrepresented entrepreneurs, specifically people of color and women, to create more parity in terms of the businesses that we have and drive in the US. There are other organizations like the Black Innovation Alliance, Latino Startup Alliance, Black VC, Backstage Capital. There's just a whole list of allies and collaborators that we work with throughout the United States. For us at Div Inc, we operate out of Austin and also Houston. So we have, 40 companies a year between those cities that we're generating, and we're looking to expand into other cities, taking that platform and our programs where we're needed and really help to provide systemic change, long-term entrepreneur programs that really lift up and really generate entrepreneurship for underrepresented founders. As we continue to move forward, again, we talked about the collaboration. It's really how do we work together with corporations, universities, state, local governments, coming together to really take these programs that we have and really scale them and grow them and make them something that's going to be around not just for the next 5 years, but for the decades and generations to come. So there are other organizations out there that I would love to share, and I may just update this and send it to the team. But super excited of what we're doing. I encourage each of you to plug into this effort, to this mission that we have, that Div Inc is on, to really change the way we are supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs and really unleash the talent that we have in the United States for generations to come.
Thank you, Preston. That was an incredibly eye-opening presentation with a lot of the different statistics that you shared. But more importantly, as you started to provide some opportunity for people to think about how they can be part of the solution as opposed to just learning about the problem. You know, to me, I kept thinking it's almost like a little bit of a catch-22 in that if you don't really start educating younger adults or dare I say children before they really get out of the school system, that they've got even that much more working against them to be able to even find somebody that would consider investing in them if they even were thinking that way. So it sounds like what you're doing with everyone in terms of providing the mentorship for education on down the line to the accelerator program, it's pretty inspiring. And I guess my question would be for people that are listening, whether they are looking for that mentorship or want to think back about how they can contribute. You mentioned a couple different stages, right? The education component, the mentoring component, the investment component, and I think Div Inc is really covering a couple of those areas. But if there's one thing that you hope that people would leave today and do, anybody listening to this, what would it be? Would it be to go take a look at Div Inc and some of those other resources? Would it be to go back to their local communities and see how their current education system is helping to facilitate better education? Is there any one or two, you know, quick hits that people could take to start having an impact?
Yeah, I say, you know, for Div Inc specifically, I welcome, you know, folks to reach out to us if they're interested in partnering with us to drive more underrepresented entrepreneurship in their communities. Please reach out to us and let's explore that strategically. And secondly, you know, Div Inc is a nonprofit. We love to the opportunities to partner with corporations and you know, state, local governments to bring the programs, you know, into those communities. And then I would say, thirdly, you know, mentorship is always welcomed. We're also looking for those who are investors, be it they be corporate, institutional, or individual investors. We are going to be launching a fund, an investment fund later in about 2 months. So we're looking for investors too that are open to investing into underrepresented entrepreneurs, whether they go through Div Inc's program or some other program. So we are open to that. So I'll leave it with those two, but any partnership opportunities to collaborate, we're open to explore those as well.
That's great, because you really cover all of the different avenues of areas of interest depending on the type of individual that's listening. So thank you again, Preston James, CEO and co-founder of Div Inc. Really helpful information, again, very eye-opening and certainly very motivating. So hopefully you'll get some calls after this. But thank you again, and we look forward to hearing from you soon in the future.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.